This is a 16-part series showing 16 different legendary builds on all 3 classes, all 5 subclasses. I'll be using 16 different exotic armors, 16 different exotic weapons, and 32 different legendary weapons, along with 0 artifact mods. And I will be showing these builds applied over 16 different solo flawless legendary missions. The playlist will be on my channel, dim links will be in the description, and if you enjoy the content, please let me know by leaving a like, a comment, subbing, all that good stuff. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy and let's get into it. Alright, so here is my second video in my legendary build series. This time around I'm doing Shadebinder with the Verglas Curve exotic bow from the Season Pass from Season of Defiance, which synergizes really nicely with Shadebinder, especially with this Bleak Watcher stasis turret build, mainly because the bow is actually going to help us get more grenade energy by producing stasis crystals, which allows us to use the fragment Whisper of Shards. So whenever there's a stasis crystal and I break it, I'm going to get 10 seconds of improved grenade energy, which I don't know what the numbers are, but it dramatically increases your grenade energy. And normally on Shadebinder, you don't really have a way to produce stasis crystals, at least not with your abilities, unless you're running glacial grenades. But if you're doing a stasis turret build, you're not running glacial grenades, right? You're turning all your grenades into stasis turrets, which is the whole, I mean, that's the whole idea behind using the aspect Bleak Watcher. And then obviously with Osmiomancy gloves, that gives us 2 cold snap charges. So as long as we have cold snap grenades as our grenade of choice with Osmiomancy gloves, that means we have the opportunity to have 2 stasis turrets. So so Shadebinder doesn't have a reliable way of producing stasis crystals within their ability tree. It would mainly be from, you know, external sources like headstone on certain weapons, which you could do. Or even easier, you could just use Verglas Curve, which is incredibly easy to make stasis crystals with. Because all you gotta do is, the exotic trait with the bow is Hail Barrage, and every time you get a kill, you're gonna get a stack of Hail Barrage. Anytime you get a precision hit, you're also gonna get a stack. So you're gonna be getting constant stacks of Hail Barrage, and you can tell when the bow is kind of glowing blue and your arrow is looks frozen. You know, basically that means that your Hail Barrage is ready to go. You can it's super easy to tell. I mean, it tells you on the left side of your screen with a buff. Right now it says Hail Barrage, right? So that just means I have one Hail Barrage arrow ready to be fired. And so the way that I can shoot that barrage is by hip firing, right? So if I aim down sight, it's not gonna do the Hail Barrage. You have to hip fire your Hail Barrage in order to shoot your arrow and turn it into a stasis crystal on impact. So, and you can build up to 5 arrows for Hail Barrage times 5, which is basically a glacial grenade, which is crazy because the glacial grenade has 2-minute 30-second cooldown, like if you were to use that as an ability. But with this bow, you can basically just have infinite glacial grenades. even if it's just one crystal, you know, like 20% of a glacial grenade. Like pretty much on demand, you can have a mini glacial grenade or a full glacial grenade. But it doesn't really matter how large your hail barrage stack is, because you only need one crystal to basically for the function of increasing your grenade energy. So as long as there's a crystal to shoot, then you're gonna get 10 seconds of ability regen for your grenade. And then you only have to produce another crystal within, you know, 10 seconds to refresh the timer on it. So that's the main synergy for the bow with this build, is that as long as you can get a stasis crystal on demand, then you can constantly have Whisper of Shards going in the background, and you'll see there's really not a single time where I don't have a stasis turret available. And if I wasn't running Whisper of Shards with this bow, then I just wouldn't have that many stasis turrets. Like, I wouldn't have them back to back. Even if I had two fully charged, and then I threw one, and I waited till it was expired to throw the second one, like, I still wouldn't have back-to-back stasis turrets. So the bow works really well for that. And then the other aspect I'm running with this is Ice Flare Bolts. Pretty sure that's what it's called. But basically, I get Seekers every time I shatter an enemy. It's gonna produce a Seeker, which is then gonna go and find another target to go and freeze. And then last season, obviously things were quite a bit different with a lot of the stasis builds, because a lot of them revolved around producing stasis shards, and then having something like elemental shards, you know, which was the old mod that we can use to turn our shards into wells, which basically gave us the ability to get Phantom Might and high energy fire at the same time from stasis shards. And stasis shards were like plentiful as long as you were doing shatter damage. If you're killing frozen targets or slowed targets, stasis debuff targets, you were always going to have shards available to pick up. And the stasis shards improved your melee energy, of course, and they still do, but that's not the main reason why all the stasis builds previous to this season revolved around producing shards. It was because it gave us the ability to get combat mods basically going, like 20% extra damage from high energy fire, 25% extra damage from Phantom Might. So it would be the equivalent of today, if you were to pick up a stasis shard, you would get armor charges. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that now. Stasis, like orbs of power, are basically our only means of getting armor charge outside of like empowered finish, which relies on you getting finishers, which isn't always practical. And there's a couple of seasonal artifact mods, like picking up fire sprites gives you armor charge, which doesn't apply to me because A, I'm not using any seasonal artifacts, and B, I'm not producing fire sprites. So I've kind of re-looked at all of my stasis builds, and I've basically, because I don't have any stasis builds where they're purely melee based, I don't feel the need to even bother making stasis shards. The only instance where shards would be useful to me would be on say a Titan, where I'm doing a lot of where I'm breaking a lot of crystals and doing a lot of shatter damage, because Behemoth can actually play into like Whisper of Rhyme better than the other classes, I would say, because you can make more crystals on Titan, not just from the super, but from glacial grenades and the new Diamond Lance cap. You can constantly have stasis shards available on Behemoth, which can give you overshields. So if you're up close and personal, then you know that could be useful. But even then, I didn't even bother on my Titan to have Tectonic Harvest. So for Shadebinder, instead of making shards, I'm using Ice Flare bolts, like I said. So that's just going to enhance the overall add clear capability and add control of the build, right? Because I'm always freezing things from my stasis turrets and from Verglas curve, which means that I'm just spreading the freeze around all over the place, like with the Seekers. So it's pretty good for that. And then also with Lightfall, we got a whole rework to the way that stasis interacts. Well, all abilities, how they interact with champions, right? So now we have abilities, basically anti-champion abilities. So for stasis, slow is going to stun overload champions. So very easy to do on warlock, because the stasis turrets are going to slow everything before it freezes them, which means that you can get a stun off on an overload. And then shatter is going to stun unstoppables, which is also super easy to do with all of the stasis subclasses. Slow is the only tricky one, because like for example on my Titan, I'm not using slow, like unless I was using chill clip on a weapon or something like that. But with my abilities, I'm using glacial grenades, and that's just instantly freezing things, so it's not going to stun overloads. But yeah, with warlock it's much easier. So then the other one of the other important fragments to the build is Whisper of Rending. So whenever you deal damage to frozen targets with primary ammo, you're going to be doing a lot of extra damage. I think it's around 40%. So it's a massive damage buff. And it's only to primary weapons, so it's not like, you know, it's not too crazy in the sense where like all of a sudden you got 48% extra damage on your heavy weapon. It's just for primary ammo. So it's not like it really helps you to do boss damage with Whisper of Rending, because you're not going to be using primary ammo. You're going to be using heavy on bosses. But it definitely makes a huge difference for ad clear. So everything that I freeze is just going to take a crap ton of damage from Whisper of Rending. That's why I'm able to like one-shot basically anything that's frozen. So Verglas curve is super good with stasis in general, but basically you can make a whole build just around this bow on stasis, and if you've got Whisper of Shards and you've got Whisper of Rending, this bow is going to be doing a lot more for you, right? Because all all the crystals you break are going to be giving you grenade energy, and everything that you shoot is going to freeze, and then you're doing more damage to them by hitting them with your bow, because it's primary ammo. So you could use this bow fairly effectively even without a stasis subclass, but you're just gonna, you're gonna massively benefit from using it with stasis. So then for the heavy weapon that I'm using, I decided to go with Fire and Forget. I almost used Quillam's Terminus, the legendary raid weapon from King's Fall. I've got that machine gun with headstone, which I really like, but I thought that would have been overkill, because Verglas Curve and Bleak Watchers are just freezing. You know, Verglas Curve is just making crystals left and right. So I don't need a weapon with headstone to make more crystals when I could just keep using the bow to make crystals. So I went with Fire and Forget on this build, and I used Quillam's on a different build, which will be coming up in one of these videos soon. But Fire and Forget was useful because I knew that there was going to be a couple tormentors to deal with in this mission. Well, mainly just one, because the first tormentor in this mission is just kind of like an introduction to the tormentor. You damage it a little bit, it goes away. It just kind of teases you. But you do have the one to deal with in a fairly small room. And Shadebinder's super it's not like a super high damage super, so I wasn't too confident in taking out the Tormentor just with the super alone. And so I wanted a decent heavy for taking out the Tormentor, and I didn't really want to use Quillam's because it's not really a damage machine gun. I don't have any damage perks on it. But on my Fire and Forget, you know, even though linear's got a nerf, they're still really good. Especially the aggressive frames like Storm Chaser and this Fire and Forget with 3-round burst. They do more damage than the precision linears. It's just the trick is landing all your shots, obviously. Because if you're missing some of your 3-round burst shots, then you're doing a little less damage overall than a precision. But if you hit all your shots, you're doing more damage. And if you're up against targets that are fairly close, then it's pretty easy to hit all your crits, so it's not a big deal. And so I picked Fire and Forget with the Tormentors in mind, that I would, that way I can break their shoulders fairly easy and then damage their chest. And then this Fire and Forget has enhanced chill clip on it. So that's why you're seeing here, like I don't have a Bleak Watcher out or anything. I'm just straight up freezing the Ultra with chill clip on Fire and Forget. Now I went into this whole big thing last season with Fire and Forget. Whenever, I can't remember which video I used it in. I did a solo flawless, like Master Glassway maybe, or something where I was using it. But I was talking about what I had originally gone with on this linear was enhanced field prep and enhanced chill clip, with the intention that I would be able to be able to freeze targets on demand. Right, the first 2 shots in the mag are always going to freeze targets. that's pretty useful. And I already had a Storm Chaser that can do a lot of damage, like one with auto-loading frenzy, one with rapid hit firing line. So I wasn't looking to craft Fire and Forget necessarily as just a high damage weapon. You know, just the fact that it's an aggressive frame linear means it's already going to be doing a lot of damage. So I just went for the uniqueness of the roll, which was to have Chill Clip on it. But then this was last season, and I tried using it in, I think it was on the Communion for the weekly Witch Queen missions, where I was attempting to use it. And last season, like, it was fairly useful against barrier champions, but if you didn't know, Stasis was bugged basically, I guess, since Beyond Light came out. Like, it's never interacted properly with champions. So, like, previous to Lightfall, if you were to freeze an unstoppable champion, it would unstun, which means that you wouldn't get to do your stun damage to unstoppables. And then with Overload champions, if you froze an Overload, they would just straight up heal. So it was just counteracting the whole, you know, the whole purpose of stunning champions. The only one that it was decent on was barriers, because it kept barriers from putting their shields up. So even though it was still a bug, it was kind of like it was a beneficial bug on barriers, and it was a negative bug on overloads and unstoppables. But they've fixed it now. So now whenever you shatter unstoppables, they're going to stun. Doesn't matter if you refreeze them. Same with overloads. You're not going to be healing overloads anymore when you slow them or freeze them, which is great. But anyways, long story short, I got so pissed off with Chill Clip on Fire and Forget when I was trying to fight Unstoppables, because it was like I needed my heavy weapon to take care of Unstoppables quickly. So even though I was getting the stun on like a different stun weapon, like last year I think, or last season it was Unstoppable Scouts maybe, or Pulses. So I would stun the Unstoppable, and then I'd switch to my heavy to do some good damage before switching back to my stun weapon to re-stun. Well, every time I did that with Fire and Forget and Chill Clip, it would freeze, like for the top 2 shots of the mag, it would freeze the Unstoppable, then the Unstoppable would unstun. So basically I'd be getting like 1 shot of good damage, and that was it, and then everything else was undone after that. So it was just pointless. Like, it was just counteractive to have Chill Clip on there. So I got pissed off with it, and then I went back to the crafting table, and I took off Chill Clip and I put on Enhanced Frenzy. And then I used it to complete my Solo Flawless Communion last season with Frenzy on there instead, and it was just a much better time, because then I was able to melt Unstoppables and not waste half of my reserves trying to deal with them. So that was pretty much the last time I used Fire and Forget until Lightfall came out, and now Stasis works. So I went back to the crafting table again after making sure that like the freeze effect was working properly, and then I put Chill Clip on Fire and Forget, because now it's working the way I want it to. And then I've got Funnel Web just for, you know, just for backup basically. I figured there was going to be a few Void Shields in this run. See how well Bleak Watcher works on Tormentors? That's actually very good. That might be the best ability other than suspend to use on tormentors, because I've used I've had to come up with a different ways to take care of tormentors, and like for example in the Callous boss fight, I've always found that the easiest way is just to blind them with a blinding GL, because you can just, you know, as long as you have ammo in your blinding GL, which you always should because they're really good on ammo, you can just blind them over and over again, and that just disables them. But if you've got a suspend build on Strand, that's also really good. Specifically like Abandoned Leaps on Titan, because then you can cast your barricade and suspend, and then get grenade energy while you're damaging, then throw a shackle grenade, then you get your basically you can infinitely loop suspend with Abandoned Leaps on Titan, so that's a pretty effective way of taking care of tormentors. But if you're not on a suspend build, and if you're not on a good stasis build, then you just want to have a blinding GL, or you can make something work with chill clip. Like if you have the opportunity to freeze them with a chill clip weapon, you could do that too. Like I've opted to use Riptide a few times instead of a blinding GL, and that works fairly well also. But fusions aren't necessarily as good on ammo as a blinding GL. But yeah, the Bleak Watcher, I mean, those stasis turrets last for quite a while, and they could just basically keep that tormentor frozen like for long enough for you to be able to do enough damage to them to kill them, so that they're not going to be a threat. Anyways, I'm going to finish this mission out, even though it forces you to use Strand here at the end, so it's not necessarily the best display of the stasis build at the end here, but I was going to let it play through anyway, because the objective is to finish the mission without dying.
If we don't stop the Shadow Legion, there won't be any city left.
And if you've watched any of my previous content, you'll know that like all my stuff to date has been solo flawless, master weekly Witch Queens, and weekly Nightfalls. And then so I've kind of excuse me. I wanted to do basically the same thing this season. Just do a bunch of solo flawless Nightfalls and weekly Lightfall campaign missions, and maybe even weekly Witch Queen. You know, all the ones that have the weekly campaign missions that have the modifiers and the surges that, you know, that it shares with Nightfalls, because that's more fun, because they're designed for full fire teams. There's none of this like scaling for solos or scaling for full fire teams. It's just the weekly campaign missions and the weekly Nightfalls. They're just all designed for full fire teams. So when you do it solo, that's a little bit more, it's more of a challenge, and it's more satisfying to be able to solo it without any deaths. So that's what I wanted to do, but unfortunately this season Bungie has they're struggling with balancing difficulty. Like, they ramped up the difficulty big time. So like in previous seasons, Master was 1610, Pinnacle was 1590. So we were already at a -20 delta last season. But with the seasonal artifact mod, you can overlevel to be, you know, you can match the 1610 no problem like halfway through the season. So then you're doing Master content on level instead of at -20 power delta. So they wanted to, for this season, for Lightfall, they wanted to change it so that for Master you would always be at a -20 power delta. So I would have thought that the solution there would have been, obviously, well, you're just disabling the seasonal artifact. Then we'd be doing it at -20. You can't overlevel it, right? You can get to your pinnacle to be as powerful as you possibly could be, but then you'd still be 20 below. But they didn't do that. For some reason, they made Master 30 power higher than Pinnacle, but then also capped you at 20 power under with it. So we have like this hybrid system now where they've introduced this power delta that was already there to begin with. It's just that you can override it with the seasonal artifact. So I don't know, it seemed like it would have been a very simple implementation to get that -20, but instead they did it so that Master's 30 above. And then Legend was even more dramatic. Like, Legend was always 10 below Pinnacle. It was always the power cap. So last season it was 1580. And then they went ahead and made it 20 higher than the current Pinnacle, but you can get up to -15. So I don't know what's going on with all that, but anyways, for now I'm just gonna do these solo legendary campaign missions and keep going with that. So hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.